Welcome to the College Neuro Network, a podcast series part of Simply Neuroscience's The Synapse. My name is Sarah.
And my name is Sasha, and we're your hosts for today. The College Neuro Network has discussions with undergraduate students studying neuroscience and neuroscience professors in order to gain insight into the neuroscience department and opportunities in the nation's top universities.
Today's episode is focused on the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League research university founded by Benjamin Franklin and known for its pre-professional culture, broad range of academic departments, and interdisciplinary approach. UPenn is also ranked number 6 in national universities by the U.S. News and World Report.
Today, joining us is Nadiyah Browning, a recent graduate of the University of Pennsylvania. Welcome, Nadiyah. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss your experiences at UPenn as a student studying neuroscience within the biological basis of behavior major.
Hi, Sarah and Sasha. Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, so our first question for you is if you could please briefly introduce yourself and tell us what sparked your initial interest in neuroscience.
Yeah, so again, my name is Nadiyah Browning. I graduated from UPenn this past May, majoring in biological basis of behavior, which is just Penn's fancy way of saying neuroscience. But I'm pretty sure they're actually changing the name of the major for the class of 2021 and moving forward. I also had a minor in healthcare management, and I'm currently pursuing a MPH or Master of Public Health at Penn as well. So I'm still at Penn for grad school, and my spark, or the thing that sparked my interest for neuroscience, was a parent of one of my best friends in high school. He came in to speak to us, I think around our senior or junior year, and he's a neurosurgeon at Penn. And his work was just truly fascinating to me in the way that he was explaining how the brain works, and, you know, it literally is responsible for everything that we do and all of the chemicals that are in the brain, and all the disorders that can also, affect the brain. And I think that's what really interested me, just looking at mental disorders and illnesses. And it really went from there, and that's why I decided to apply to Penn, really off of the fact that he was a neurosurgeon at Penn. So that's where it came from.
Yeah, that's so cool because we've been doing these episodes for a couple of weeks now. So we've talked to a lot of professors and undergraduates, and it's kind of cool to see where everyone's initial interest sparked. So our next question is, what factors drew you to committing to Penn for your undergraduate studies?
Yeah, so I'm from Philadelphia, so the closeness was attractive to me. It wasn't at first. I definitely wanted to get out of my hometown when I was initially thinking about colleges, but then it just made much more sense to stay close to my family, and then also financial aid. And so if you guys don't know, UPenn is a need-based school in terms of financial aid, so they typically give students a good amount of money. And that was an extremely big factor in me deciding to attend there. And then once I did my own research on all of the different things that the school had to offer, whether it was extracurriculars and the research that I could do, and the types of communities that they had, especially for minority students, it really solidified for me that that was where I wanted to be. So,
yeah, that's awesome. And this next question might be a little bit difficult to answer because you might not have experience with other universities, but in your opinion, what sets Penn's neuroscience department apart from those at other universities?
You're right. It is a little bit difficult because I don't know what other universities have, but I know that something that we, I guess, market a lot is our interdisciplinary studies, and specifically within our department, there's so many opportunities for cognitive and clinical neuroscience within our major. Something that I think is really cool that I'm not sure many other schools offer is the ability to do research for a credit. It's a course called BBB 399 or 499, the honors version. And if you've been working with a lab over your undergraduate career, you can essentially continue that work as you normally would over the semester, but use it towards a credit, which is really nice because most times you're getting paid to, be a research assistant, and it's work study money. So it kind of lessens the workload, and typically seniors do this. So that's one point. And I think the minors that we offer are also really cool. So I mentioned that healthcare management was my minor, and it kind of overlapped with the BBB department, like they have it on their website. And so the minor's through the Wharton School of Business, but half of the minor is BBB courses, and then the other half is healthcare management. And so it was nice for me as a BBB major that I could already kind of knock out some of the BBB courses of the minor, and I only had to take the healthcare management courses. So those types of things. I know that there's also like 2 other BBB minors that have to do with like computational research or something like that. But I think those kind of 3 points there really distinguish us from some other departments of top universities.
Sounds really like cool and interesting, actually. So our next question is, so far, or when you were at Penn for undergraduate studies, what was your favorite class as a BBB major and why?
Yeah, I had probably like 3 classes that were favorites of mine. One, I took the fall semester of my sophomore year. It's called Drugs, Brain, and Mind, and Dr. Michael Kane teaches that course. It's really like a neuropsychopharmacology course, and the way that he taught it was just so engaging, and he kept us laughing every single day in class. So it was just really fun to always go to that class, which is not common among college students to like really want to go to class every single day. And he would, not always lecture us, but, just show us really cool videos on how drugs affect the brain and kind of break down like what everything really means. And he also added some sort of social justice aspects to the class and how communities of color are affected by drugs and what that means for our society. Another class that was a favorite of mine was a neuroendocrinology seminar. So it was on the smaller side. Typically, our BBB classes can be up to at least 100 kids, but this was maybe 15 of us. And we were never actually tested on anything that we learned in the class. And so it was such a great opportunity for us to just come to class and really learn and be interested. And everyone was like just super into the material and not worried about if they were going to get graded on, what the professor was teaching. We still, had other assignments, but they were all papers on research that we wanted to do. So it just gave it a completely different feel for the entire class. I never felt like, if I didn't understand a topic, then I was going to be penalized for it. But, our teachers were super accessible, and I really enjoyed that class. Another one was abnormal psychology. It wasn't technically in the BBB department, it's technically under psych, but a lot of the classes tend to overlap. And again, that professor was extremely engaging. She was she is an actual psychologist herself, and so she would bring a lot of cases from her real life work to the class. Obviously not, violating HIPAA, but she made us want to learn, and that class probably had 200 students, and to keep 200 students really engaged and wanting to know more, I'm sure is a really difficult thing to do, but everyone was always excited to be in that class. So
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about some of your professors. So speaking of professors at Penn, how kind of like accessible are they? Is it easy to get in contact with them for help, research opportunities, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. The BBB department is really great in the sense that where it's located on campus, it's like not far to get to. I think with some of the other departments, that can be an issue, but their offices are really accessible. They're usually always in there or they're teaching. Most of them have their schedules on their doors, and it honestly, in some ways, feels like having access to a high school teacher where you can just pop in and ask for help whenever. And a lot of my professors stay, or they did, or they probably still do, they stay up really, really late. So if I had a late night question, I would shoot them an email and they would respond back to me in minutes. And I'm thinking, okay, it's 2:00 in the morning. I didn't expect you to respond, but they always did. And so I appreciated that. I mean, we're always kind of looking for ways to help students. They have ample amount of office hour times, and if that doesn't fit with your schedule, they're trying to meet with you at a different time so that you understand the material. So yeah, all those things combined, like I have no complaints with any of the professors. They were super warm and understood if, you had an issue and you couldn't take a test a certain day, and they'd give you extra time. So yeah, I really loved my professors.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's amazing to hear how engaging classes are at Penn and really how devoted the professors are to talking with their students and keeping that communication line open. And so kind of our next question for you is there anything that you found surprising about being a student at Penn or something unexpected now that you've spent 4 years and graduated?
Yeah, when I first entered, I don't think I expected Penn to be as competitive as it is. And I actually used to be a tour guide for Penn, and one thing that we would say in our tours is, this is such a collaborative school, and all the students are really collaborative and everyone works together. And that's not necessarily the case with all facets of Penn. And so when I think about like all of our clubs and extracurricular activities, they're extremely competitive to get into, and it almost feels like the college process all over again when it comes to applying to a club that you want to get involved in. That's not the case for all of the clubs, and we have, I don't know, I think it's like over 600 clubs that we offer, but some of the really like top clubs that are super attractive to students, they're just really difficult to get into. Another thing that surprised me was probably how diverse Penn truly is, and how strong the minority communities are. That's not something that I expected, but I'm truly grateful for it, and that I had that experience coming away from Penn. Yeah, but I think definitely the competitiveness, and it really depended on the classes that we were taking, but for the most part, our BBB classes were pretty collaborative, and all of the students were super nice, but classes in some of the other disciplines or other majors like definitely weren't the same. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something to keep in mind looking for colleges or in this college search process, like whether the culture is more competitive or collaborative. So I think that's really interesting to hear that at Penn there are some competitive aspects, even once you get into the university. And so kind of adding on to this like culture question at Penn, we were wondering if you could talk more about how demanding it is to study neuroscience at Penn, and kind of like what your day-to-day schedule looked like as a BBB major at Penn.
Yeah. So one thing that I didn't know until my junior year, so typically in the College of Arts and Sciences, you declare your major at some point in your sophomore year, and typically people wait until the end of their sophomore year. And I think I declared my major early on in my spring semester of sophomore year. I didn't realize until the very end of my junior year that the BBB major is the largest major that the College of Arts and Sciences has to offer. And it was just super surprising for me because I, would listen to my friends and the majors that they had, or maybe they were not even in the college, but in Wharton or engineering or the nursing school, and their schedules were just completely different. They had, a little bit more free time or flexibility to take other courses. And that was probably a really big shock to me, and kind of disappointing because I wanted to, think about studying abroad or take more fun courses. Like I took an art course, but I wish I would have taken more courses like that and just had more free time in that way. That being said, I still think I had a lot of free time in my day-to-day. So thinking about my everyday schedule, I wouldn't have classes until maybe 12 p.m. And then I typically ended classes around 4 or 5. And I made my schedule that way because I'm not a morning person. So I remember freshman year, I had classes at 9 a.m. and I would have to walk super far to get to a class. And super far at Penn is only like a couple blocks, but it was still far to me. But I just couldn't do it. So I changed my schedule moving forward, and I would have classes mainly in the afternoon, and all of my extracurricular, my clubs would be afterwards. But I was super involved. I think my sophomore year I was like in 10 different clubs, which was a huge mistake. And I think it took away time from studying. I think a lot of Penn students will tell you that they're not actually a student first. They are kind of in this pre-professional world of, doing really great work for their clubs, and it's unpaid work because we're just in clubs, but it's, work that is at the caliber of jobs. And so I still think I had a good amount of time to study. It's just really important to think about like time management once you get to college, and like how you're actually splitting up your time between homework and your class time and your extracurriculars, because that can be really tricky. I think with all of the majors, even though BBB was the largest, like you have ample amount of time to get things done and, still have a social life and go out on the weekends. Like it's completely doable.
Got it. Yeah, it's amazing to hear that Penn really gives you the opportunity to do so many different things, even with a pretty demanding major. So kind of our next question is, talking more about your schedule, we were wondering if you conducted any neuroscience research, and if you did, if you could talk about your experience with that.
Yeah, so I think it was maybe my sophomore year. No, it was my junior fall. I decided to work in a rat and mice lab. It was a very interesting experience, but we examined the behavioral, intracellular, neuronal, and endocrine mechanisms governing energy balances of rats and mice, and how these processes are dysregulated in obesity and the comorbid disease states. And so on a day-to-day, I would just kind of maintain the daily upkeep of the wet lab. And I got to do really cool things like, slice the brains of rats and mice and mount them on little slides and look at that and, kind of figure out what we were looking for in terms of the markers that we were trying to see expressed in different parts of the brain. And that was really cool. I got that job through our BBB major listserv, actually. So I think about every week, someone who works in the department would send out a bunch of internships and jobs that students could get involved in. And I think that was my favorite part about finally declaring my major, that I was like a part of the BBB community officially, and we had like ample resources. And they would always kind of send out a bunch of different opportunities, not just for research, but just things that we can get involved in, whether it's fellowships, or things that we could apply for, grants, anything like that. And it just made the experience like a lot more accessible than when I was like a freshman and I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. Another experience that I had was this summer after my freshman year. I worked at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And we collected data on all the patients seen at CHOP for disordered eating to prove that disordered eating is a psychiatric disorder. And that was really interesting. It was a dry lab experience. So I was working at a desk all day and kind of inputting information from their medical records. And the doctor that we were working under made it a really cool job, because every Friday she would let us go to the resident lectures. So like the med student, like they're now residents, they would have these lectures on whatever they were learning about medically related. And because she knew a lot of us wanted to be doctors, she would let us sit in on those lectures. And that was a lot of fun. But yeah, those were like two of my biggest internships or like research assistant projects that I had during my undergraduate career.
Those sound like amazing opportunities, and it's so incredible to hear that you did one like right after freshman year. And I think it's like really rare to have an undergraduate already doing research at that early on in college. And I know like a lot of students interested in studying neuroscience kind of have research as their priority when they go to school. So that's really incredible to hear. And then kind of our next question for you is if you could talk about what your favorite thing about studying neuroscience at UPenn was just overall.
Definitely, the community that we had. I think I touched on a bit of this a little bit earlier, but it really like solidified for me at our graduation ceremony, which a lot of majors didn't have, but the BBB department had their own virtual graduation ceremony. And it was just the funniest thing that we we could have experienced. Like, all of our professors worked really hard to create a cheesy skit for us based off of, like, you know, all of our classes and the types of students that we were. And it's so the biology major is actually a really, really big major, but BBB, which is kind of similar, is one of the smaller majors. And so, you know, the relationships that you'll have with the other students and your professors is, you know, next to none. Like, it was a really, really great time. And I think, other than, you know, just learning from people that were literally experts in their field, just how kind they were, and, like I said, accessible all the time. And I think other majors in the college, like, definitely don't have that just because they're so large. But if I, like, saw some of my BBB classmates in, like, a history class, like, we would study together, and it would just be kind of like that closeness across, like, any type of class. And I really appreciated that. So yeah, definitely just the people.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think like having a very close-knit culture in such like an intensive major is just an incredible thing. It helps you study better and you have all these connections. So yeah, that's incredible.
Absolutely.
So our next question, I think you've briefly touched upon it at the beginning, but now that you've graduated, what are kind of your plans for the future as of right now?
Yeah, so right now I'm really interested in public health. During my time at Penn, I was pre-med, and another thing to note is that the BBB major, like, almost perfectly overlaps with a lot of pre-med requirements, and that was another reason why I chose that major. But then towards the end of my college career, I realized that, you know, I'm not sure that a medical degree is really where I want to go to have the impact that I want to. And so I decided to do something called submatriculate. And at the end of my junior year, I applied to Penn's MPH program, and I got in. And I started taking grad school courses my senior year. A bunch of different programs or grad school programs offer this at Penn. Obviously, like, you can't submatriculate into, I don't know, Penn Law, but they do have a bunch of different master's programs that you can submatriculate into. And so that was really nice to kind of start that journey early. And from here, I've realized that I'm really interested in public health communication, just because during my undergrad degree, I was also really interested in marketing and consumer psychology, because I thought that went really well with neuroscience. And so once I finished my MPH in like another year and a half, I think I want to get a PhD in public health communications. And, you know, I feel like the pandemic has definitely made it clear why this is so important. And I'm grateful in some ways that it's kind of opening people's eyes to see why public health is so important, but especially public health communications, because I feel like during this time right now, there hasn't been, you know, clear communications across the entire, I don't know, even state sometimes, but definitely across the entire country about what people should and shouldn't be doing. And I think, you know, the current administration and just the way that things are going, we've really failed in that way to be clear and concise about what is happening within the pandemic. And, you know, you have in the South, some people are not wearing masks at all, but here in Philly, like, a lot of people are. But it's like, you know, if we're not all on one accord with what the pandemic really is, then it's not really going to stop. And so being clear and being able to communicate with the public on, you know, health safety and the risk of their behaviors is super important. But yeah, that's kind of what I want to go into. I don't want to rant, but yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And that sounds like such an amazing field to go into, especially in these super uncertain times. But our next question is, do you have any tips on how high school students can get involved in neuroscience, like any extracurriculars, organizations, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this organization is really great. It's something that I didn't even know existed. And whoever started it, like, amazing. And I think if high school students, like, just actively even reach out to, undergraduates at universities that are nearby, professors nearby. So I know, at least at Penn, there are a lot of professors that are even hiring high school students to be a part of their research. And so, just kind of putting yourself out there and looking things up on the internet and be like, okay, what exactly do I want to do within neuroscience? Because neuroscience is such a broad topic in general, but there's so many things that you can do under that. And I think kind of even before you get to college, like figuring out what aspect of neuroscience you really like. Because I didn't realize until I was in college that maybe I don't really like the biology aspect of it, but I really like the behavior part. And so figuring those things out really early on are super important. And I can't think of like any other organizations similar to this one, but I know at least in Philly, I'm not sure if this is still happening considering the pandemic, but there was like a neuroscience fair that happened at the Philadelphia Museum of Art every summer. I feel like they went from city to city actually, but that was something that was really cool. And they had a bunch of different organizations that you could join just at this fair in general. And yeah, I think just looking up things like that could be really nice and cool. So
yeah, that sounds great. And also kind of adding on to like another advice related question, we were wondering if you had any advice for any students who specifically want to apply to UPenn to study neuroscience or basically anything, and they just are interested in that school.
Yeah, I would say to anyone applying to any college anywhere, it's so imperative to do your research on the school ahead of time and to show that you've done your research in your college essays. It's something that I did heavily in terms of what Penn had to offer academically. And it's something I talked about in my Penn essay like all the time or all throughout it. And what I did specifically in terms of neuroscience, I looked up, what Penn was doing currently in terms of their professors or students, what cutting edge research they were conducting. And I put that in my essay because, the college admissions officers may not know, but the fact that as an applying student looks really good. And yeah, it just shows that you're committed and that the college's name can't be copied and pasted into any other essay. I think that's what admissions officers are really looking for, that, you've looked up how many clubs the school has to offer. You've looked up kind of what sets them apart, and you're talking about it all throughout your essay. So yeah, I think just showing to the admissions officers that like you're really obsessed with this school, that you've done all the research that you possibly can, and this is what you're committed to. But also showing that you are willing to kind of change your mindset or just explore other things. I think sometimes when people apply to schools with a set major that they're thinking about, they can kind of pigeonhole themselves. And colleges and universities want the students to explore before they decide anything to study. And so to kind of talk about that, that you want to explore, but this is like what you're currently interested in, I think it is also really important. They like to, think that they've been able to change people and like who they are and their trajectory. So just mentioning that, I think, is a really good idea.
I think it's really easy for students or applying this year to kind of get lost in the application process, and especially when researching schools, it can be like an easy way out to like kind of use that copy paste template you were talking about. But I totally agree with you in terms of researching really intensively if that school is a fit for you.
Yeah, so that wraps up our questions for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us for the College Neuro Network. Your responses were so insightful and will definitely help high school students listening who are researching colleges and are interested in either majoring or minoring in neuroscience.
Yes, well, thank you so much.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. It's so great to be able to talk with you.
You too. I wish both of you the best of luck in your future careers as well. I'm guessing both of you are really interested in neuroscience, so I hope that you guys get everything out of this field that you possibly could. So
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.